Okay, let's face it. Late night snacking has a really bad reputation, and maybe deservedly so, but maybe not. Today I'm going to talk to you about a study that shows that bedtime protein shakes could actually boost fat loss, increase muscle growth, help recovery, and speed up your metabolism the next morning. But do it the wrong way and you'll wipe out all those benefits. In this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Mike Ormsbee, Professor of Nutrition and Physiology, and we'll break down exactly how to do it the right way. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Anthony. Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure. I spend a lot of my time chatting with coaches and physiologists, and we talk about training, what types of training sessions to do. And it may be only in recent years that I've started to understand the purpose of training is to get faster. And we get faster by creating an adaptation to training. And adaptation isn't training alone. Adaptation is the training stimulus plus recovery from the training, and that gives us the adaptation. So the recovery part is what I want to focus on today, because digging through some of your academic work and some of your previous podcast appearances, I think you hold a lot of the answers that will maybe unlock next level performance for a lot of athletes. And where I want to start with this is the idea of eating around bedtime. Because most of us grew up with the idea of, oh, well, if you eat going to bed, that's going to make you fat. Especially I raced for a French team, and this was like drilled into me from French directors. Like, you don't want to eat going to bed because it lies in your system all night and it's going to make you fat. Where's the truth around, I suppose, fueling going to bed?
Yeah, man, this is such a popular topic. And let me give you a little nuance with it, because I think it's appropriate for this particular conversation. It seems to me like everyone's mostly confused around just that. Will it make me fat, or is it a way to recover and get ready for the next day of training? So the nuance is this. Well, let me start with a story. So I was sitting around as an early researcher 20 years ago and looking around at the people who were the leanest and the most athletic that I could imagine. And I was at the time playing college ice hockey. And then it carried on to even when I was getting into amateur triathlon, and the people were very, very lean, and they were hungry, and they were training all the time. And so I was thinking, is there really a reason we should be cutting off food at any particular time, unless you're purposely trying to like restrict calories? And what would be the purpose of that? And so we began some experiments early on with different types of populations. So some were really fit, probably more like the cyclists and people listening to your podcast. But also we had regular people who were just off the work site. They were maybe getting out of a chair all day long, and we started them into this process. And man, what we found in 2 decades of this work is that if we have a protein-centric small meal, we're talking 40 grams of protein in a pre-sleep feeding, that it has several interesting things. The first one is it's not going to make you fat. And we've tested this a number of different ways. One of them is we actually put a small probe into your belly fat or into your gluteal fat. And then we see how much fat's coming out of your fat cell as a result of whatever environment you're in. This could be sleeping, as we're talking about here, but other cases we do it with exercise and stimulate it, or give certain drugs to stimulate it or inhibit it. And in every study we've done in that, there's no difference between having absolutely nothing or a small dose of a protein-centric protein shake, essentially, before bed. And so we are not seeing it. And even in the long term, and in this space, the longest study to date that I'm aware of was only 12 weeks. So take that as you wish.
Yeah.
Even in that, they're having benefits, and that's in people who are training, and they had benefits for like muscle quality. They had benefits for muscle protein synthesis and the ability to sort of keep muscle. If you're in a place where you might be losing mass, it could be an advantage to do that. And so the short answer is it's not going to make you fat, but we need to look at what it is. If you're having
just to jump in there and to clarify on that. So if we talk about the protocol for the study that you examined. So if you take somebody, we're not talking about redistribution of macros across the day. We're talking about additional calories. So if somebody's on 2,500 calories a day, and then they go 2,500 calories a day, but add an extra,
150, 200
yeah,
max.
for 40 grams of protein,
Mhm.
there's no difference in body weight for
No,
those extra calories.
no, there's not. And so, and it's even in other studies where it's not, this isn't the design, but they do they kind of like give way too much protein. There's these protein overfeeding studies. And in those studies, they give so much protein, like more than you would ever need. They're up to about 4.4 grams per kilo, which is
Okay,
very
that's
high.
even hard. That's hard to eat.
Yeah, it's very hard to eat. It's not sustainable, but they did it just as a proof of concept to see what would
Yeah,
happen. And in those cases, they're not gaining body fat. And so the thought is, well, what's happening to it? You can't deny the laws of thermodynamics, but it turns out that it's mostly being led down the lane of it's increasing the thermic effect of food, sort of revving up your engine even while you're asleep. You're able to actually digest it and absorb it. We weren't even sure if you could do that at first because there weren't many good studies at that point. This is, back 2010, around that time frame. It was really just my lab and Luc Van Loon's lab carrying out this work in protein synthesis and recovery specifically. But Anthony, one of the coolest studies we did is we were looking at Ultraman triathletes. Are you familiar with Ultraman? Like these,
it's anything past Ironman, is it?
it is. It's well, this particular race is specific. It's a 3-day triathlon, and so it's a Friday is a very long swim and a bike. Saturday is a very long bike, and then Sunday you'd run a double marathon, and you just crush yourself. But you're training, you're racing all day long, and so in that case, the nuance is really important. If you're going to race again tomorrow and you haven't eaten much all day on your bike, you better eat because you have to wake up at 5:30 in the morning and be ready to race
Yeah.
shortly after that. And so it's really way too simplistic to say do it or don't do it based on body fat. Like if you need to actually compete tomorrow, you should be doing it. And in every study, in my lab and others are kind of exploding in this research now, nothing showing a negative. And so it's either neutral or a positive, depending on the design of the study
Okay.
from pre-sleep feeding of a protein dominant food.
And does the timing matter? So if you go for a long ride, you come back in, you've emptied yourself or you've partially emptied yourself of glycogen, you come back in. The old school theory was we have this glycogen reabsorption window, which is a little bit time sensitive. So you want to get those carbohydrates with maybe a small bit of protein in a 4-to-5-1 ratio back into yourself. And people took this very strictly back in the day to, setting stopwatches when you come in the door to say, hey, I've got 15 minutes to get this recovery
Yeah.
drink in. I think modern interpretations aren't as strict as that, but from my latest reading of it, there is still sort of some time bound element. Are we seeing the same with protein intake if we take it 2 hours before bed versus 60 minutes versus 15 minutes?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is no, but there's some sort of nuance around that as well, of course. So I think we should define really when we're talking about this pre-sleep feeding. So the one thing to consider is the way we're doing it is 2 hours after dinner
Okay.
and within 30 minutes of getting into bed.
Okay.
All right, so that's sort of the structure. So we're not talking about a late meal. In fact,
Yeah.
there are studies that show a very big mixed macronutrient meal late at night could be problematic. And so that's not what we're talking about. So sort of lay that out on the table. The other
So
thing is
is it a protein shake really? Because it's a zero carbohydrate meal.
you can have a little bit of carbohydrates, but most of the studies have done just a protein shake. There are some that have
Okay.
given maybe at max maybe 10 to 15 grams of carbohydrates in
So you're
with the
looking like a
shake.
cottage cheese or something like that.
Yeah,
That's
so
very low
and we've done it,
carbohydrates.
and we've done that. Like we went to the store, we pulled a cottage cheese off the shelf, and then I sent it to a company that manufactured it as a powder, and then I gave either the cottage cheese or the powder or a placebo, and we wanted to see did the consistency of the food, like semi-solid versus liquid, actually make a difference in anything, and it didn't. In that study, it didn't. And so the timing of it or the consistency of it in that study didn't matter, but the timing of it also it might matter in terms of when you it's the timing of the exercise that I think that matters more than the timing of that pre-sleep food. And what I mean is this: when I went back through all the literature on this, it's not every case, but most cases, if you did your hard exercise anytime in the morning and then had a pre-sleep drink, it wasn't quite as effective and whatever the outcome was. But if you exercised in the evening, let's say you ride after work,
Yeah.
then that pre-sleep feeding was more effective. And like I said, that was probably 80%, 85% of the papers that had timing of exercise at night and pre-sleep protein had the best outcome. And we've seen that now in like professional rugby, professional soccer, some elite level athletes that if they're training in the evening and having that, that's where you have the benefit. And so, does it matter? It's probably secondary. The total daily protein intake will be number one, and
Yeah. Okay.
secondarily will be the timing of it close to your exercise. And for me, it
Yeah, that was
doesn't.
kind of my next question is like, did you see a difference if, or did the study go down this direction where you split it into two groups, one group that's hitting or surpassing their daily protein targets, the other group that's undershooting their daily protein targets? And, is it a case of maybe a false positive because the late night protein snack is actually just bringing me closer to my recommended allowance?
So probably yes. We could look at it that way, but that's not really how they were designed. So the group who had protein in some of the most beneficial studies did get more protein in the total day.
Yeah.
So in that sense, sure. But if we look at it from an applied perspective, I don't care. You're at home and you have one more chance to feed, and it could help you with recovery and performance.
And
So
it's
why
definitely
not?
not negative.
And it's not negative. It's not
Yeah.
going to hurt you, and it might help you. And that's really how it works across every single one of the studies we've done so far. But we have to also look at what are the outcomes. So we've probably looked at like resting metabolic rate, fat metabolism, body comp change, strength, those types of things, recovery, and we even looked
Yeah.
at
So talk
different.
us through some of them. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So in those spaces, the biggest take home was that if you ate something versus having nothing, your morning resting metabolic rate was a little bit higher than if you had nothing. And so take that as you will. Is that good? Is that bad? It depends on what your scenario is. If you're looking to lose weight and you're burning a little more calories, maybe that's a good thing. If you're a hard charging athlete and you need to be efficient in some way, then maybe that's not great.
Yeah.
So you have to really look at the nuance of it with
I think
those
for the
different
majority
strategies.
of listeners who are like a little bit time crunched, the battle is rarely, hey, I'm too lean, I'm struggling to fuel. The battle is normally, oh, I could do with shedding 2-3 kilograms before
Okay.
race season.
Yeah. And in that case, I would 100% add more to the diet, more protein to the diet. And the pre-sleep strategy is just a very easy one because typically you're at home. And so you've got access to protein dominant foods or snacks.
Yeah.
So that's a very simple time and place to sort of strategize it. Say you missed a protein feeding earlier, you didn't get enough in the day. All right, well, now you have an option. You've got something to eat before bed. So you check that box. You're not going to be hungry when you're going to bed. That might help you sleep better. And
I was
then
just about to say that
yeah,
there's also like definitely a society part to this because, a lot of working people that I see that are busy fall into some routine of the last hour before bed, 90 minutes. At some point, there's a chill out time where they're sitting down watching Netflix. And when I chat to most of these people, this is the time that their willpower seems to be at the lowest point for their life being infiltrated by that little sneaky stealth snack, like, oh, that Maltesers in the fridge are kind of calling out to me more than they were at lunchtime. So
yeah,
knowing that you have a protein shake coming just before bed, it really helps that hungry feeling when you're trying to fall asleep.
yeah. So let's talk about sleep for sure, because that's sort of where the new outcomes are in this space. I think that's important. But before that, I want to tell you one other story about a study that was looking at, and it wasn't only a protein; it was actually a cereal. And what they did is they gave individuals a regular meal at dinner, but it was ad libs. They could eat whatever they wanted. And then one of the groups they told before bed, you're going to be able to have a small bowl of cereal. They came out to less than 200 calories. In the other group, they said this is your last feeding. And so when they did this over the weeks of the study, the group who was told they could eat again later ate less total calories because they didn't have as much at dinner. They didn't go back for seconds and thirds.
Yeah.
And so psychologically, perhaps it was where you say, all right, I can stop now because I know later on I can have a small snack and I'm going to be fine. As opposed to, I'm done until tomorrow. let me go have a whole second helping here, which actually got them more total calories at the end of that study.
There is something about that though. Like when you know, even people have experienced this on the bike. Even I recently finished this crazy race across the desert in Granada. It was like 818 kilometers. It's nonstop. But a big challenge in it is refilling your water because you're going for, there could be 7-8 hours before you can find a fountain. And knowing you have water versus needing to drink water are two different things. If I have half a bottle of water, I may not feel that urge to drink. But when the water is gone, that urge to drink is definitely stronger than knowing you have no water coming. It psychologically, it messes with you. And I found that's exact same when I was chilling out afterwards. I was writing reflections in the diary. I explained this as like the exact same as the sensation I feel if I'm locked in on my diet and I'm counting calories and I know dinner is my last meal of the day. It's a very different feeling than if I know, oh, well, I can just have a snack at any time if I get hungry. I eat way less at dinner time.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what happened in this particular study, and that's crazy, man. That race sounds sounds up.
Yeah,
It's almost as good as the. Have you heard of the Skydive 100?
No, what's that?
So you start in an airplane and you jump out to the start line, then you run 100 miles.
Any race that starts in an airplane, I'm down for that.
So you skydive to the start line, clock starts, and you go. And I was talking to an athlete who was actually doing Ultraman and had just finished that race. And when I talked to him, he had finished that race like 2 weeks before. And I said, "How fast were your first couple of kilometers when you were running?" He goes, "Way too fast." Your adrenaline was pumping. Yeah, and he said the first two, he was like a minute or 2 minutes faster for what he had planned for the 100K.
We need a bike version of it where they throw the bike out the airplane with it as well.
Maybe they exist. I haven't seen them.
So we're talking about the benefits of that protein. So it's that increased metabolism the next morning. Is there effect on body composition as well? Was that measurable?
Yeah, so let's walk through that. So the what we initially started was just the metabolic side. We also measured, just like with a visual analog scale, a questionnaire, how hungry are you? How satiated are you in those early studies? And so it tended that if you ate, as would make sense, you were a little bit more satiated in the morning. So we didn't actually put food out and see how much you ate, but you told me you felt a little less desire to eat in the morning if you had the pre-sleep meal. So that coincided with it. Take that again as you wish. Do you want to have that outcome or not? And sometimes it doesn't matter. Even if you see that, you could still eat plenty of food if it's presented in front of you. Although about 10 years later, someone did present food and they actually saw no change in what they actually ate, despite saying they were a little bit less hungry in the morning. So okay. Interesting outcomes there. So that started it. The other group was looking at muscle protein synthesis, and these poor guys initially had a nasogastric tube that was feeding them protein while they were asleep. And so they would literally just put it in their gut while they were sleeping. And so that study just was, again, showing that while you're sleeping, you can digest and absorb amino acids and proteins at that point. Then they started feeding them actual shakes. And so that, again, coincided with it. You can still digest it, absorb it, and use those proteins because muscle protein synthesis was elevated if you had protein before bed. So there was sort of another win. And then that group stretched out a 12-week, it was actually a resistance training study. And they had people resistance training 3 days a week with the pre-sleep feeding or not. And at the end of that period of time, those who had the pre-sleep drink had a little bit bigger muscle. So cross-sectional area, the muscle was larger. They had better one repetition maximum strength outcomes in terms of the training adaptation to that period. And then their body composition, lean mass, was also in the positive direction, meaning increased. And so all of those things put together had a pretty good story in terms of what was happening with pre-sleep protein. And then we started having caveats like what types of protein, how much protein, what about sleep? Sleep was a major factor. And every time I talk about this stuff, somebody will say, but it wrecks my sleep before bed. And my answer for that person is, if you know it wrecks your sleep, don't do it. It's just a tool in your toolbox.
Because interestingly, I was speaking to Olaf Boo on the podcast a few months back, and he's a coach to maybe two of the greatest triathletes ever, Blumenfeld and Gustav Eden. You probably heard a lot about this Norwegian metas, and they're dominating in long course triathlon at the moment. But we were talking about different recovery modalities, and his theory on this is that he'll often suggest on training camps to his athletes to forgo massage, to forgo foam roll and compression, and go to bed 1 hour earlier, go to bed 90 minutes earlier, because sleep is so much more powerful than using that extra time to get massage. And I was like, whoa, that was the first time it really hit home to me just how powerful a performance enhancer sleep is.
Yeah, for sure. Sleep is like the X factor, and we all take it for granted until you lose it. And I tell you, if you lose it for any reason, for any period of time, you know it quickly. You're miserable, you're irritable, you're just, anxiety goes up, your food habits can change, your whole demeanor can change. But that's really interesting. So, like, obviously, if it's working, it's working. I would probably choose to do the modalities and extend sleep on the other end if you can, because then you get everything.
I guess they're just like so many training hours that it's like between eating, training. This isn't going to be the case for amateur athletes, but for those guys, they're getting through so much volume at training camp of both food and training.
Yeah.
There's just not hours left in the day.
Yeah. I mean, in this particular case, I think we're talking about nutrition in the recovery bit. And so there's probably a mode and a place for everything and a tool. Like I think a lot about training and recovery from a longevity perspective and overall health span perspective, not just elite performance like you're talking about here. And from my angle, some of those tools just for soft tissue work and the ability to stay in the game as we continue to age is a really important factor.
Yeah, and I think the caveat to that is I don't think he was recommending this as a 365 strategy. I think it was more of a training camp they were on. I'm not sure what recommendations he's making the other 50 weeks of the year.
Well, speaking of training camps, there are some data actually with feeding carbohydrate and protein leucine dominant drinks in a camp scenario too. And they actually found with the group who was consuming the pre-sleep protein and it had carbohydrates as well, had better power output on the daily measures that they were looking at in that training camp.
So rewinding to the sleep one, like what does perfect look like? If you were trying to go into a pro athlete hires you to go and work with them to optimize their sleep system, their sleep strategy, whatever you want to call it, what does perfect look like in that scenario?
Yeah, that's really a tough question, but I would start with figuring out what they think is normal and what their restrictions are. So are they alone or they have a bed partner? Are they in a house with children? Are they in a house with pets? What is their situation? And if it's a case where you're alone and you can do whatever you need to do to optimize sleep, which may be where you're going with this, then I would look at the sleep environment. I would make sure that we have protocols in place so that you're actually sleepy at a certain time. Try to get a handle on what's their circadian rhythm for are they typically a night person or a morning person? I'll tell you, with some of the athletes that we have here at Florida State University, there's a big move to get away from morning practice because in these collegiate athletes, when you're getting them up at 5 a.m. for a 5:30, 6 a.m. practice, you are messing with their sleep. And so they've actually done away with that and then fit their training into other periods of the day to purposefully allow more sleep. But in this optimal,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's like, when are you going to train? And sometimes you don't have a choice. Like for amateur folks, like if I'm going to be able to get up and train early, it's because I got a full day of work. I got children and all the things. But for an elite individual who may not have those boundaries to what they're working with, then I think you can really optimize on either side. But if I told you, Anthony, like, do you like to go to bed at 8 o'clock? What would you tell me?
It's like the kids are still playing out on the roads. Like it's still middle of the day for me at 8 p.m. It's like I'm just getting started with work there.
Yeah, so it's like you got to figure out what's effective for you. What are you used to? And then really just inch it out. Like I would never, like with training, nutrition, or with sleep, I wouldn't all of a sudden take you from 6 to 8 hours. I don't think it's going to be effective for you. I would inch it out little by little. And then one of the biggest strategies that's worked for me personally is just having a locked in wake time and a set time within about 30 minutes of each other on either way in 99% of the time, with a rare disruption to that.
let's break it down a little bit. You mentioned sleep partners. What's the data saying on sleeping on your own versus having, a boyfriend or girlfriend you're sleeping with versus letting a pet sleep in the bed with you?
So this is a huge problem in the research right now. There is very little to describe that, or papers that have actually asked that question. And so when we started diving into the sleep world, because first we were just all metabolic with this pre-sleep feeding, and now we're looking a lot at actual sleep. We have to ask that question. Then you have to make the decision, Anthony. Am I going to test you in a new environment or your regular environment? And if I
Because
say,
bed size has got to matter as well.
sure.
Like if you've had that experience of staying with your wife or partner in a hotel in a small bed, like, it's so multifaceted, isn't it? Because if you're staying in a small bed and there's no aircon in the room and it's slightly warm outside, it's like,
yeah,
this is a setup for a miserable night's sleep here
well,
already.
that's what I was talking about with the sleep environment. So like, how dark is it? How cool is it? Have you taken steps to have a wind down routine? Have you eliminated, the phone lights and the blue lights and things that are inundating us? And so like just taking a strategy in that to have a typical routine, something where you're trying to hit a close to within about a 30-minute range of a time you normally go to sleep, and you sort of wind down with that routine. It's really, really helpful to get entrained into that type of a cycle.
I can remember vividly a December training spin. I was on the back roads, there was fog, wet leaves, potholes everywhere. I was riding on a descent, one-handed, trying to stab this tiny little mode button and praying the battery would last until the final climb of the day. You know that anxiety, the is it going to die anxiety, it totally ruins your ride. And the truth is, for years, that was normal. Every season I got into this repetitive cycle. I'd end up buying a new set of lights in the winter. Normally plastic lights, plastic brackets which would invariably snap, charging ports which would fail, and batteries that would fade. Most lights feel very disposable. They're shiny for the winter and then straight into the bin at the end of the winter, and we repeat again the following winter. That all changed when I got my first set of exposure lights. Suddenly this wasn't a consumable anymore. This was a piece of kit built to last a lifetime. That's why I'm absolutely buzzing about the fully updated exposure range. Reflex 2.0 automatically adjusts the brightness of your light. It dials it down when you're going at slower speeds on the climbs, and then it unleashes the full power of the lumens on the descent, so your hands stay where they need to be, on the bars, so you don't actually crash. There's another really cool feature. It's called reserve mode, and it kicks in when runtime hits 0. It drops to a low beam and you get another 30 minutes to get you out of trouble and get you home. USB-C charging is a total game changer to my mind. It means you can get now 70% faster charging, but importantly for me, you can top up your lights from a power bank mid-ride. So if you're doing an ultra, a bike packing trip, or you're going on an event like me at Badlands, just plug it into the power bank and away you go. No need to worry about batteries failing. Exposure isn't just another set of lights. This is the last set of lights you're ever going to need to buy. Go to exposurelights.com to check out their full range. And when you talk about blue light, how effective is blue light blocking glasses versus just putting screens away?
That's a good question. I actually don't know. I've looked at the data on it early on, and people were sort of going after those. I know that like sort of the biohacking community really digs into those glasses. I guess I'm old school enough that I would just put it away and
Yeah.
not try to mix with it. But in our athletes and things, we just try to have it put away. And in our studies, our research studies, we have it put away.
There's some stuff that I've never seen data on it, but I just know from, and I'm a big believer, the more I chat with, some of the best physiologists and scientists in the cycling game, I'm more a believer of like the peer-reviewed data is brilliant, but in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter to me what a 500-person double-blind placebo study says. All I really care about is how this affects me. I don't care. I'm not a scientist. I just care about how I feel. So I've never
Yeah.
seen any data on if you walk in a wooded environment like a forest, 90 minutes, 2 hours before bed, that you sleep better. But I know if I walk the dog in the park just as the sun's coming down, I'm coming home and I'm yawning. And when I hit the bed, I'm like, boom, out cold.
Yeah. Well, you have it right on. Like, we can't disregard the research. It gets us to a point to make good decisions.
Yeah.
But even like I said before, if you know that eating before bed, like right before bed, gives you heartburn and you're not going to be able to sleep well, then just don't do it. Like you have to pay attention to how you respond. And remember, all the data that I'm talking about is mean data over large groups, small or large groups of people, and you might be the outlier. And so sometimes in the research game we look for means, and in the performance game we look for outliers. And that's where you need to identify sort of where you fall on that line. But you're spot on. Like if that works for you, Anthony, you do it, and like that's what's going to be your routine.
Have you seen any, and maybe I've thrown this at you and you probably haven't fully thought this through. Like, I love this idea of upstream versus downstream decisions. Like one bad upstream decision can cascade into multiple downstream decisions. So the example in physiology I'd use with this is if you take a bad data point to measure zones, like you aren't properly trained to measure lactate, and you take a bad lactate reading, now all of a sudden you're misjudging training intensity, you're misjudging fatigue levels, you're misjudging adaptation. There's a lot of negative downstream effects to just one bad data point. But I like to think about the inverse of that. Is there an upstream positive lever I can pull that has a cascading effect of positive habits downstream? So for me, that example of walking the dog outside 90 minutes before bed, it gets me off screens. It stops me eating, which up to this conversation I thought was a good thing. It stops me eating. It gets me some fresh air. It helps my mind stop thinking about work. So I looked at that as, okay, well, this is a positive upstream decision that cascades into 4 or 5 really good downstream situations for me. Is there anything you can think like that one lever that listeners should be pulling in that last 90 minutes to 2 hours before bed?
Yeah. I think you kind of hit it with your specific routine, but like in my own experiences, it is all about that routine. And if that can stay, like that's your routine, like, and mine is slightly different, but it's a way to relax with the family, get the children to bed, and then you have a little bit of time. And so if you can just match that each day,
Yeah.
that will get it going. And then psychologically, you're like, okay, I just did this, so I'm probably going to sleep well. Guess what? Then you're probably going to sleep well. And then
Yeah.
those things just definitely snowball forward. And I can see it in the nutrition space too. So if you can just simply lock in this case, your protein for the day, well, okay, that's going to cascade. So now each meal is locked in at what you need. You're less likely to overeat because the protein is going to be a little bit satiating for you. And if you're dialed in with that number, the other things become easier to manage. You just manipulate the carbohydrates around your training intensity for the day, and it becomes far easier once you have
Yeah.
a base, something to sort of lean on.
I think protein's a great example of that upstream because you have that natural displacement then of the junk calories, you have the extra satiety levels that comes with it.
Absolutely.
Everyone seems to be wearing trackers or a ring, Whoop.
Yeah.
Even 8 Sleep, I think, has HRV. Yeah, actually, this is a good direction because I'm curious about this. 8 Sleep now has HRV built into the mattress, I believe. I'd be kind of old school and thinking, I don't know if I want to sleep on a battery.
Yeah. 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 So technology, certainly they're all over the place. In 2020, we got into this COVID era. And so the only way for us to keep doing research was to flip to wearable technologies. And so at that point, we got a grant with Whoop, and we actually were able to get Whoop bands on female athletes at 5 different universities around our country. And so we were able to track them over that whole COVID season, and through the Whoop app, they were getting questionnaires, and we had access to their data on the backside. And so that's where we really got heavily into it. But we've also looked at continual glucose monitors like CGMs on athletes. We've looked at CGMs in non-athletes and diabetics in different spaces. The mattress technology is interesting. We've actually used that a competitor to the 8 Sleep that you mentioned. Chili beds at the time, chili pads were what we were using. And yeah, there's a downfall to some of these companies that say they can test everything. And I would be worried about a mattress measuring my HRV.
Yeah, I'd be a little bit curious to know the effect. I had a guest on who was an expert in EMFs, electromagnetic fields, and he was working with some top athletes, like some of the guys who were playing in the Ryder Cup at the weekend. He was confidentially telling me he couldn't name them, but they were struggling from strange wrist injuries that were basically unexplained. And he was able to bring it back to, let's maybe just stop using the wearable for a while and see what happens, and the injuries mysteriously cleared up.
See, there's two different schools of thought on that, because I feel like you're right. Like, you can get data overload. Everyone knows that. And there's some scenarios where I've been speaking with professional, like football here in American football, and where they were using all this technology, but then the athlete would wake up, see that they're in the red zone, which would mean basically not to train that day.
Yeah.
And even if it was a false reading, they'd be like, I don't feel good. And do you want an athlete feeling like that on game day? Like, what if you have a race, Anthony, you wake up and it says you're not rested, but you actually feel fine, but that thing's telling you don't feel fine. And now all of a sudden you're in a place where you're like, what do I do with that? So a lot of teams are blinding it now, where the data comes to a coach, but not to the athlete. So they can't actually.
It's a good idea. I've heard that as well. And like, I often wonder, like, there's no, you rarely take a decision without externality. And by externality, I mean like an unintended side effect of that. So if you're using like I'm not picking on 8 Sleep because I've never used them, but assuming you do sleep a little bit better in a climate controlled mattress, but maybe it's less than ideal to be exposing yourself to EMFs 8-9 hours a night that you don't need to. It's like, am I getting more benefit by being cool, or am I hindering myself here with the EMFs? Like, it's hard to know where to draw the line on this one.
The EMFs are outside of my lane, but I'll tell you what's really interesting is it's more your personal preference. So I thought, based on the literature, that so we did a study on this with our women's soccer team years ago, and we had them sleep on the chili pad or not, and then we looked at all types of outcomes from it. And what was interesting from that, we're still trying to publish that paper now because it had a bunch of issues because it was very applied in nature. But what we found was it wasn't everybody at a low temperature. It was at what temperature do you prefer to sleep at?
Yeah.
So some of them went up, and so they slept way better at a warmer temperature, but it was their choice. So we had to say self-selected temperature rather than what I thought was that everyone was just going to make it cooler. And it just didn't turn out that way.
We started this conversation around training adaptations, and I've fully bought into your arguments on sleep and how important it is. But can we quantify how bad it is for us in terms of training adaptations from, say, a week or two of messy sleep? Have we seen studies on that?
Yeah, sort of. So the studies that exist in that space tend to be not as long because you can't really restrict sleep without massive problems showing up. So you'll see the longer term ones in like military studies where they're allowed to have these soldiers have total sleep restriction or very limited sleep for longer periods of time. And so in those studies, things go really bad, really quick. And in just a couple of nights of that, you have a problem. You carry that on even longer, and you've got physiological outcomes that are not wanted. And in cycling or any of it, even just in life, like if you're just trying to compete your best in your job, like you wouldn't want to show up underslept.
Unless you're a surgeon, and then it's celebrated.
Gosh, that's a whole different argument.
So bizarre when I chat to some of my friends and they'd be like, I'll give you a call tomorrow. I'm on the tail end of a 48-hour shift and I'm just going in to do an appendix operation. And you're like, cool. I wouldn't want to be that patient.
Yeah, you have to ask now when's their first shift, or is it the end of the shift?
Yeah. What do the Giro d'Italia, Stage Slayer, Mads Pedersen and half the professional peloton have in common? Well, they're all turning to NOMIO, the natural performance enhancer proven to reduce lactate buildup during intense efforts. In the 2025 Giro d'Italia, Pedersen's form was undeniable. The Danish star surged to 4-stage victories. This was a major leap in form from his previous season, and a key part of this preparation and performance was NOMIO. Developed by the same researchers who discovered the performance power of dietary omega-3 nitrate. You know those beetroot shots that half the peloton were using? NOMIO is clinically proven to lower lactate levels, reduce oxidative stress, improve training adaptations, and deliver a noticeable boost from the very first time you take it. Riders are reporting bigger threshold power, fresher legs mid-race, and quicker recovery, all from a formula made with just 3 natural ingredients: broccoli sprouts, lemon, and sugar. Whether you're racing at the front or you're smashing local segments, NOMIO helps you get more out of every ride. Take it before key sessions or races for an immediate edge, or take your training to the next level and get more out of your hard work. Go to drinknomio.com, that's NOMIO, and check out this game-changing supplement. Details are in the episode show notes or description down below. It's bad. If you were designing a perfect recovery day, so I've had a 6 days out of the 7 training, and you're an athlete with very little commitments, no family commitments, wife and kids are away, he's off work for the day, you're basically dealing with a pro athlete here. What would you look to include in the perfect recovery day? Are you looking at, playing around with unlimited modalities here? You can throw in cold, heat, massage, whatever you need.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I don't know the right answer because, again, personal preference shifts people in different ways. But in
It's
general,
more like, objectively, is there one?
yeah,
The
just from
Cristiano
like,
Ronaldo day.
yeah, from like the data, I think the first thing would be uh, making sure you're catching up on any kind of nutrient deficit that you've had from those 6 days. Because if that's not the goal of weight loss, you got to make sure you're fueled up and ready, have your tissues recovering. It's not just about muscle either. You've also got disruptions to gut and hormone levels and other things. So making sure that the eating is dialed in, having enough fuel to match or to get to whatever my goal is for that day. And I've slept appropriately the night before the full day of recovery. I'd probably put a nap in that recovery day because that's quite helpful as long as you can then sleep again that evening. And so with the nutrition and the sleep, those would be my primary ones. And then I enjoy a recovery day and planning a recovery day that is it just still has activity in it. So not just sitting around, which is the case sometimes we see, but some mild activity, making sure blood flow. I like to see like Normatec boots and these things working like anecdotally, maybe not so much in the research, but anecdotally, I've seen them quite effective. And then the contrast baths. So I don't think I do just cold or just hot. I think I would do both contrast baths and try to use that strategically. I'm a fan of massage as well, so I would probably throw that in for soft
Is there
tissue
just,
work.
even before we jump onto the massage
Yeah.
and the contrast stuff, is there a line between, because obviously heat is a stressor, is there a line where we say, okay, today is technically tagged as a recovery day? How much is too much stress to be taken on in terms of the heat?
That's a great question, and I don't think we know a specific number or a line or timeline because some of that data just is newer, and we don't know like we're describing this optimal scenario. So that's also going to be an N of one, playing with
Yeah.
how does that affect you. What's interesting about science in the field of sports science and nutrition is that it keeps evolving. And so what I recommended 5 years ago could probably change. And I've even changed it in the classes I teach here in terms of like some things that are coming out. So I like it in that way that it keeps evolving, but it also makes it really hard. And so we have to start somewhere. Even if I'm giving you a diet plan, I need to start somewhere based off of a couple of assumptions. And then have to let that play out and see if how you felt with it, what weight changes were happening, what body comp changes were happening. And so even with the best tools, I've got all of them at my fingertips here. It's still trial and error. At the end of the day, you get as close as you can with the data, and then it's a bit of trial and error.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And I think for me, my takeaway is I'm definitely going to start experimenting with the protein shake before bed. So I will be reporting back to you on that one.
Yeah, so that's what's really cool. And I just because I think it's interesting, the thing that's changing now is it's being looked at for not only just the protein, but other sleep ingredients. And so there are several um, basically sleep cocktails that are coming out now that have different micronutrients, different vitamins or minerals that are in there. So like theanine, magnesium, zinc, those are some popular ones in the sleep. Um, Shakes or powders, almost like pre-workouts, ended up having this whole cocktail of things.
Yeah.
Pre-sleep protein, a lot of the companies that now sell products are adding other things to it to assist with sleep. or just with anxiety or calming down a little bit. So I think we're going to see a emergence of new products on the market now.
Because there's interest in, if you talk to athletes who train late at night, like if you take a typical cyclist who works and has a family, they'll get their long endurance rides on a Saturday and Sunday, and then you'll try maybe get 2 to 3, but 2 really working key sessions, which you'd normally split them maybe Tuesday and Thursday. But if you're a busy dude with a family and you're working a long, stressful job, it could be 8 o'clock in the evening before you start your session. So you're like 60 to 90 minutes, you're finishing at 9:30. You're pretty wired because you just finished a VO2 max session at 9:30. It almost feels like we need a supplement to take us back down through the gears, to bring adrenaline down and simultaneously recover. So I don't know if it's a, glycogen reuptake hitting our protein, but also mixing in some sort of, I don't know, CBD or something to take the edge off to bring us back down.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking at now. There are 3 of those products on the market already that are really interesting. And so we're going to be
Anything you'd recommend?
The 2 that we've tried so far, and there's no relationship, I'm not financially connected to any of them, but one company called Sleep Protein that I've worked with, they sent me some samples, and that was anecdotally really nice. We haven't tested it yet in a laboratory setting. And then the other one's called Sleep Builder, which is from a company called Spoken Nutrition. And so I've been kind of playing around with their different cocktails, and I'm in a cool situation where a lot of people will send me product to try. So I get access to things and to try them out. Now, again, those don't have data yet. What they're doing is they're pulling on data from individual ingredients, and they put them all together into one cocktail. But so far, the feedback that I've given on those are both really nice. And the Sleep Protein actually has protein built into it, which is a nice addition. And the other one does not, but it has really calming, sort of settling feeling. And it's been a nice addition to my nightly routine.
Nice. It comes with some soft music as well when you buy it. It's like
have Anthony Walsh talking in your ear.
Whispering sweet nothing. Mike, thanks for chatting. I really appreciate it, and we'll catch up again for another chat in the coming months, hopefully.
I appreciate it. Have a good one.